On the 23rd of February 1948, at the age of 42, a German SS officer, who was responsible for the slaughter and death of thousands of people, was brought out to a firing range. Stood opposite him were a collection of executioners, French soldiers, who were there with their rifles primed and ready to fire into the condemned Erich Isselhorst. Isselhorst was a leader of the Einsatzkommando, and he was responsible for the slaughter of many people inside of German-occupied lands during the Second World War. There were many members of the Nazi death squads, known as the Einsatzgruppe or the Einsatzkommando, who were never brought to justice or trial for their murderous actions. Some managed to escape any form of punishment, but Erich Isselhorst was caught and condemned for his crimes. Welcome to The Untold Past. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Erich Isselhorst was born on the 5th of February 1906 inside the area of Lorraine on the French-German border. At the time when he was born, this land was part of the German Empire, and he had a rather normal schooling in different cities around Germany, and after he graduated from school, he took a job inside of a rubber factory and studied law for a number of years. But Isselhorst was drawn to the Nazi Party, like so many people were. Adolf Hitler had promised to restore German pride following the defeat of the First World War, and he also promised some better employment opportunities and jobs. Many people flocked to join the Nazi Party, and this included Erich Isselhorst, who officially joined in August 1932, and he was within the first 1.5 million members of the party. But then he became a member of Hitler's Brown Shirts, the SA, in 1933, before he transferred to become a member of the SS the year later. For the Nazis, Isselhorst was someone who they thought had a future and role inside of leadership, especially with regards to the special services. He was given a job inside of the SD, the intelligence agency of the SS, and he was also later given a job within the Gestapo in Berlin. He was transferred to the Gestapo offices in Cologne, and from February 1936 to April 1938, Isselhorst became the head of the Gestapo in the city, and he was then moved to Austria to help impose Nazi rule and will following the Anschluss and annexation of the country into the Third Reich's empire. Whilst this was all happening, he was a member also of the Wehrmacht, but was held in reserve, and he took part in different training, including alongside anti-aircraft soldiers and units. He then, following his work in Cologne, became the head of the Gestapo in Munich, the very city where Hitler had tried to take control of years before. Inside of Munich, he was responsible for interrogating many people who were suspected of resisting Hitler and the Nazis, and he was also known for torturing many of those. But at some point he was even severely disciplined himself by senior SS members for his behaviour. Isselhorst continued to hold different roles linked to the police force, and he was in command of the security police, or the SIPO, in Belarus during the Second World War, and he was then given command of Einsatzkommando 8. These were a mobile killing squad and a subgroup inside of Einsatzgruppe B. They were attached to Army Group Centre, and the soldiers under Isselhorst's command were mobile executioners, who were to round up civilians and people marked for execution and extermination in accordance with the Nazi policies and laws on race. They would usually execute these people in mass shootings, and they walked people out to the edge of their settlements or towns, and they forced them to dig mass graves and pits. Once these were dug, the victims were then led into the pits, and they were forced to stand in front of the executioners, who were stood on the edge of the mass grave. There was also an executioner who sometimes patrolled within the pit, and he ordered the victims to lie on their front, usually on the bodies of those who had gone before, and he then shot a pistol into the nape of their necks. Sometimes this was applied on the edge of the pit, and the victim was then pushed into the mass grave, who was one of those men who was commanding the Einsatzkommando death squads, and his men, as well as shooting, also took part in many hangings and executions in this manner, where locals were strung up from trees or lampposts or anywhere, and this was done to strike fear into the hearts of others and to make sure they stayed in line with the Nazi regime and the German occupation. He was also given other roles leading Einsatzkommando 1 in Einsatzgruppe A, and his men were known for their slaughter of many civilians. Following a period commanding the death squads in October 1943, he then went back to Germany and was sent to Strasbourg, where he was in charge of the security police yet again. However, whilst here, he got involved in a number of war crimes, including Operation Waldest, in which many villages were burned to the ground in mountain regions to prevent them then being used by Allied soldiers. The villagers who lived here were then sent to concentration camps, or they were forced into slave labour programs. The SS raided many villages, and there were 39 British SAS paratroopers executed during these actions and raids. Isselhorst himself ordered the execution of captured members of the SAS in accordance with Hitler's deadly commando order. Some of these prisoners were taken out to local forests, and they were then shot in the head, before they were then buried inside of bomb craters. Isselhorst in 1945 was then moved into the Reich Security Main Office in Berlin, and he remained here until April 1945 with the looming threat of the Soviet Red Army in the German capital. But on the 12th of May 1945, he was arrested by American soldiers whilst trying to hide out in southern Bavaria. He was taken to a British military court and was placed on trial for the execution of the British SAS soldiers, and as they were technically prisoners of war, they should have been given some form of care and not been slaughtered and executed where they stood. For this he was sentenced to death, and Isselhorst was then in May 1947 then handed over to the French, as he was then condemned by another court, but this time the French military tribunal judged him. On the 23rd of February 1948, the former chief of the SS and the Einsatzkommando, Erich Isselhorst, was led out to a firing range, and there was a stake ready for him. He had his arms tied together behind his back, and he was secured and tied to the post, ready for the firing squad, and they also made sure his legs were tied together and he could not move. This gave the executioners the best chance of shooting straight into their target. A priest had been appointed to accompany the execution party, and following this the executioners were then made ready. It's not known if Isselhorst had a cap placed over his head or not, and if he would have done, then he would not have seen his executioners. The commander of the firing squad then shouted his men to be ready, and they raised their rifles, and they fired straight into the former SS officer, a man who had given the command for his own executioners to shoot into innocent people during the Second World War. Erich Isselhorst was a man who was known for his sadistic war crimes, and he was someone who had little remorse for his crimes. He had a detailed career inside of the SS, SD and other Nazi organisations that struck terror into the lives of many people, but his deadliest work was done on the Eastern Front, ordering his own firing squads to shoot into innocent people in mass graves. Still today there are many crimes of the Einsatzgruppe which are yet to be uncovered, as people who became victims of them still lie today buried under the earth. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.